Ben Scott will be giving a remarkable speech later. We also are lucky to have in attendance Bishop Brian Pryor and his wife Stacy. And also, coming back home, we have Bishop Mark McDonald. We ran out of points. Also with us today, we have, welcome back home to Margaret Lucy Thomas and her brother Fisher. And also at the table back here, we have Reverend Tom Harry's next tonight. We have some greetings from some special guests that could not be here tonight to read for you. First of all, Bishop Andrew Waldo sends greetings from the Diocese of the Upper South Carolina. He's not able to be with us, but he'll stop sometime next summer. The Reverend Andy Henninger and Jay, currently living in Gregory, South Dakota, wish they could be here and send greetings to the St. Paul's family. We'll have a joyful celebration. We will be with you in spirit. Also, Bishop Jim Gelman sends his greetings. He reports that he has failed retirement again and is now serving as interim rector at Trinity Church, Newport, Rhode Island. He knows that it's the oldest Episcopal church in Rhode Island, founded in 1698, opened in 1726. He did make it clear that he's not trying to run out St. Paul's. And then finally, the Reverend Howard Anderson. Howard sends his greetings. Howard fondly remembers 10 years of ministry at St. Paul's, dominated by the angels and the architecture of the splendid old and elegant building that has sheltered so many of us in the best and worst and most holy of times. He mentioned St. Paul's version of the Squad, the McGivers, the Westmorelands, John Hunter, Kay Country, Alan and Hartley, and so many others who welcomed us, challenged me, and supported me through so many twists and turns in a lively and complex 10-year ministry, which I treasure. He still remembers one senior St. Paulite telling him, quote, "That was a good sermon, but you missed several excellent opportunities to end it." That's not clear. I do have a little story about Howard Anderson. I just have very fond memories of him. Turns out that my wife Beth and I were his first marriage at St. Paul's. Also with that, we were his first counseling session. Pre-marriage counseling session. And he gave us some type of like Myers-Briggs type quiz and questions and all that stuff. And I'll never forget the look on his face. He kind of had that Larry David Berger enthusiasm look at him. Yeah, we right for each other. He married us anyways, and here we are. I kind of think that maybe we're the ones that pushed him away and sent him to Washington, D.C. of all places. Next up, I would like to introduce tonight's speaker. Venerable Canon Benjamin Scott is married to Sally, who Phil says is your greatest accomplishment, by the way. They are currently members of Calvary Church in Rochester, where he is baptized, confirmed, and sponsored for ordination. He is a third-generation member participating with the fourth and fifth generation Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and in theology from the Shora House. He has done additional studies at Oxford, Rome, and New York University. He has published 2 books, The First Cathedral, with Robert Nesland, and The Frontier Chapel to Spiritual Oasis, as Ezra and others. Most of his ordained ministry has been in small towns of southern Minnesota under a national program for small churches and as archdeacon in southeastern Minnesota. In St. Paul, he was rector of St. Mary's Church, and in New York City he served St. Joseph's Parish Day School principal at St. John's in the village of Askew. He has been honored as canon at the Faribault Cathedral and with the Liberal Cross by Bishop Pryor. Sally, too, was honored as canon for her role in leading the diocesan small church music program. Sally and Ben live on a farm near Rochester, which has been in the Scott family for over 150 years. Having land patents received under someone named Abraham Lincoln. Next summer, they will celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary. And Ben will celebrate 60 years as a minister. This talk is entitled, "We'll Be Sitting at My Cube in 2050. Ladies and gentlemen, the Venerable Canon Benjamin Scott.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation to be here this evening to celebrate 150 years here at St. Paul's. Sally and I have been to St. Paul's a couple of times for talks in the history of Episcopalians in Minnesota. We remember one given in Alcott Hall to the deacon formation. On returning from the lunch break, Sally fell on the ice in the St. Paul's parking lot, breaking her left wrist. She sat patiently all afternoon listening to the names and dates tumbling out of my lecture with her arm high up, watching it swell and drop. Then she drove me back to Rochester and the ER at Mayo Clinic. But all's well that ends well. There is no ice on the table tonight. Her wrist is only bent just a little. And she can still play the piano every day. My storytelling this evening highlights 3 heroic Minnesota missionaries that are celebrated in our Episcopal Church liturgical calendar. They are the Right Reverend Jackson Kemper, the Reverend Dr. James Lloyd Beck, and the Reverend Andrew Gallo. They are cradled in the treasured lore of Minnesota Episcopalians. And finally, I'm going to tell another meaningful story this evening, and it's the tale about the Diocese of Duluth and the interplay between St. Paul's and Trinity Cathedral on the street. I'm going to begin with our presiding bishop's visit to La Crosse, Wisconsin this past year. He came to La Crosse to celebrate the Reverend Dr. James Lloyd Gregg. The Diocese of Eau Claire was observing the 19th century vision of Dr. Gregg for the work of the Episcopal Church in what was then the Northwest Territory. Dr. Gregg had been one of the 3 founders of the Neshota House. It was a semi-monastic community of men on the shores of Upper Neshota Lake west of Milwaukee. In 1835, the Episcopal Church's first missionary bishop, the Right Reverend Jackson Kemper, was consecrated by the House of Bishops without any diocesan election. He was authorized to serve the Northwest Territory, wherever that might be. He built his home and mission center in the woodlands near Neshota Lake, And in 1840, Bishop Kemper traveled to General Theological Seminary in New York City and appealed to the students or missionaries for his vast mission territory. Three responded: James Lloyd Wright, William Adams, and John Henry Hobart Jr., the son of the Bishop of New York. These three men were inspired by the Anglo-Catholic Oxford movement. They made personal commitments to each other not to marry during their Nashotah mission, to commit themselves to a monastic rule that involved daily morning and evening prayer, to celebrate weekly Eucharists on Sundays, to wear a garment of a black cassock and one of those squash hats each day, and to receive funding from a common purse rather than personal compensation. They were known as the Religious Brethren. They constructed 2 buildings out in Nashotah Lake, the Red Chapel and the 4-room Blue House for dormitory and classrooms. It was known as the Associate Mission. Their preaching and teaching took them all throughout eastern Wisconsin in the wilderness, gathering largely German immigrants under the trees and in log cabins to hear the word of God preached revealed by Jesus Christ. To the eastern establishment, Episcopalians in this semi-monastic community of Anglo-Catholic men authorized Bishop Kemper in the harsh and forbidding Wisconsin wilderness was radical and divisive. Churchmanship issues from the Oxford movement in England would conflict, but would soon fracture the entire American Episcopal Church and its mission. At Nashotah, the Associate Mission felt the churchmanship conflict mostly in the fact that money was slow in coming from the Eastern Episcopalians. William Adams was primarily interested in teaching rather than preaching, and he was also attracted to Bishop Kemper's daughter. In 1848, they were married. John Henry Hobart found the Wisconsin wilderness not to his liking, and he returned to the east. He had learned that at Nashotah, the men had to milk the cow for breakfast, and they had to cut down the tree, split the wood, and keep the wood pile dry before lighting the stove in the Blue House in the January Wisconsin morning. In 1850, Dr. Bragg turned in his resignation to Bishop Kemper, gave the keys to the Reverend Hazel Cole, and started the journey across Wisconsin to the Mississippi River at La Crosse. Nashotah changed its character from an associate mission to a theological seminary as it is today, still a center for the Anglo-Catholic movement in the Episcopal Church. Dr. Bragg and 2 followers arrived at La Crosse atop Grandad Bluff, looked across the wide Mississippi toward the Indian Territory on the Minnesota side, celebrated the Eucharist on a rock, baptized a German family in the river at the dock, boarded a river steamer to St. Paul, pitched a tent in that little wild west village, and began the mission of the Episcopal Church in Minnesota with the name of Christ Church St. Paul. It is known today as the Mother Church of the diocese. Dr. Bragg found one Episcopal priest in Minnesota Territory. He was the chaplain in Fort Snelling, the Reverend Ezekiel Gear, serving under Bishop Kemper. He is known as the Patriarch of the diocese, and he welcomed the missionaries from Nashotah. In 2019, Bishop Kirby, presiding bishop, came to La Crosse, and at the parish church in La Crosse, blessed the icon of Dr. Bragg, holding the red chapel of Nashotah in his arms. The presiding bishop blessed it with clouds of incense, a rumbling organ, and the chanting choir before he gave an energetic and a dynamic sermon on the way of love as the mission strategy of the Episcopal Church in the 21st century. Now for some stories about Emperor Rev Ben Scott in Minnesota. During his first year at this new St. Paul Associate Mission, Rev and the religious brethren built a church building and opened a parish day school. They raised funds from friends in the east. They paddled canoes on the Mississippi, Minnesota, and St. Croix rivers to preaching stations at points of entry for white European settlers and adventurers. The west side of the Mississippi River was still Indian territory until the treaties were signed with the Dakota and the Ojibwe and the other indigenous peoples, and they were removed to reservations. Fraud, corruption, racism, and warfare were in the white air as the indigenous peoples felt the incursion of the American dominant culture. It was from a Methodist interpreter located on Gull Lake named Emigado that Rev heard a call to begin a mission among the Ojibwe. When an invitation from Emigado to come to Gull Lake to propose the mission for Chief Hole in the Day, Rev responded at once, walking from St. Paul to Raymond, all the way, only to find Hole in the Day had moved on to another area. Later that summer, Emigado called Rev back to Raymond. He walked the trails in the heat of summer in a cassock and his squash hat, a 300-mile round trip. Hole in the Day gave tribal consent to begin the mission, and Rev turned over Christ Church St. Paul to the Associate Mission team and gathered a mission community for Gull Lake. By 1852, an Associate Mission team had begun a teaching and preaching rule of life, built a chapel, moved into a mission house, and paddled in canoes to a chain of preaching stations along the lakes and rivers of Crow Wing County. It was named St. Columbus after the celebrated monastic who founded the Celtic Missionary Center at Iona. In the late 1850s, unrest was brewing among white and black Americans in north and south of this country. Eventually, civil war broke out. Troops were being withdrawn from Fort Ridley, where St. Columbus Associate Mission, and the Ojibwe young men took their advantage to harass and terrify the frightened Episcopalian missionaries. The mission house was staffed with both lay men and lay women who provided not only education for the baby boys and girls, but housekeeping at the mission house and Episcopalian church services in both English and Ojibwe. Among the young women in the community was Miss Jane Maria Mills. Dr. Rev fell in love, and they were married before long by the Reverend Ezekiel Gear of Fort Snelling. At the showdowns, the Reverend were aghast. In the meantime, the harassment of the missionaries by the young Ojibwe men became dangerous. In 1857, after a late night incident, the missionaries fled Gull Lake in the dark to St. Paul, and Nagabo was left in charge of the mission, and Rev's team of white men and women, lay and ordained, looked for a new location for the Associate Mission on the Minnesota frontier. For a year, Rev and Associate Mission team members traveled among the frontier towns and raised funds. The fur trading village where Alexander Faribault had a successful business was a promising site. It was on the crossroads between the Ojibwe and the Dakota peoples, and an entry for European immigrants to settle the woodlands and prairies of southern Minnesota. When Brett came into the little town, Alexander Faribault and the committee met him with an offer of land and money. move to a narrow reservation between the upper and lower Sioux agencies on the Minnesota River was underway. The streets of the village of Faribault were humming with restless immigrant families speaking German, Dutch, Norwegian, Swedish, French, and Scots-Irish, along with the dialects of the Dakota and the Ojibwe. Breck and his associates visited every house in town during the first 2 months in 1858. In May, a mission house was built to house the association. By June, a church school building was constructed nearby in the town square. It was named the Parish of the Good Shepherd. Classes began on June 3rd with 167 boys and girls, among them 17 Dakota and Ojibwe, housed in a little building next to the mission house called Andrews Hall. In 4 years, just 4 years, there were 35 families in the parish and 100 in Sunday school. In 5 years, there were 110 baptisms during the year and about 400 adults associated with the parish and 3 Sunday schools. Now, it is likely that these staggering reports reflect a large number of nominal Episcopalians that happened in those days too. But the associate mission of the parish of the Good Shepherd was impressive enough to win Faribault instead of the state capital, St. Paul, as the diocesan center for the new bishop, the Right Reverend Henry Benjamin Woodward. Alexander Faribault offered him land and money, as he had done with Breck. Land and money always speak to bishops. In June 1862, the cornerstone of the first building constructed as a cathedral in the American Episcopal Church was laid on the town square in Faribault. In August 1862, the Dakota United States War exploded at the Lower Sioux Agency. Both the Dakota and the Ojibwe nations were reeling from fraud, corruption, racism, denigration, and exploitation by the federal and state governments and by unscrupulous profiteers. At the surrender of the Dakota at Camp Levis in September 1862, then the incarceration of the Dakota Nation in Fort Snelling, the public hanging of 38 Dakota and Cato on the day after Christmas 1862, and the expulsion of all Dakota from Minnesota to Crow Creek on the Missouri River by river steamers in the spring of 1863 resulted in multiple fractures in the Episcopalian mission communities throughout Minnesota. Breck was heartbroken. In addition to the tragedy within the indigenous nations in Minnesota, Jane Maria, Breck's beloved wife, had died in the winter of 1862, leaving him with 2 small children. Mrs. Breck was buried with 2 Ojibwe girls who had died at the same time. Then in 1866, the old mission house where they lived burned to the ground along with all Dr. Breck's personal possessions and papers. He believed that the Episcopal Church in Minnesota was a total failure. He and Bishop Whipple clashed publicly, and in 1867 he had addressed the diocesan convention to bid his farewell. The central theme of his sermon at that convention was that the Episcopal Church is not a mere denomination. Its bishops are its chief missionaries. Its cathedrals are not grand edifices. They are an association of people, an association of missionaries. In 1867, Breck and his 2 children and his second wife, Sarah, left Faribault for Benicia, if I pronounced that right, California. There he would found 5 parishes and schools and died probably of exhaustion in 1876. His remains would be returned to Nashotah House in 1890 to to be buried ceremoniously, of course, by 14 bishops and 200 clergy, and is visited today by missionaries from throughout the Anglican community on pilgrimage. Back in 1856, Bishop Kemper was eager to carve a new diocese out of his vast Northwest Territory jurisdiction. He called the primary convention of Episcopalians to Christchurch, St. Paul, to draft the Constitution and canons with an administrative and financial structure for the diocese. The convention was rancorous. The clergy disagreed over who could vote. Remember, in much of the Episcopal Church, people of color could not vote, nor could women. Many of those attending were from the missions among the Dakota and the Ojibwe. In addition, some of the clergy were high church, like those in Wisconsin, while others were low church, like those in the Eastern establishment. Kemper adjourned the primary convention without any action and told Minnesota Episcopalians to go home and get their act together. In 1857, the next year, Kemper called a second convention, and apparently differences were resolved and the paperwork for a new diocese were adopted. In 1858, the next year, Kemper called a third convention to elect a bishop. Now the clergy got into it all over again, over high church and low church, and there was no election. The next year, the back pew politics had moved into full gear, and after 3 days of balloting, elected an unknown candidate who didn't even know he was in the running. He was the vicar of the storefront mission of St. James Episcopal Church in the railroad yards of Chicago. He was Henry Benjamin Whipple, and to accept the position, he left his wife Cornelia in Chicago with their 6 children because Minnesota provided no housing.
Oh my gosh.
He took a salary cut, was consecrated in Richmond, Virginia at the General Convention as the Episcopal Church broke in two because America was in civil war. He boarded a river steamer to St. Paul and found no welcoming committee to receive him. He would serve Minnesota Episcopalians for 42 years. His name, above all others, would characterize Episcopalians in the public eye right up to the present time. Today, the federal building at Fort Snelling, at the end of the bridge there, bears his name, the Bishop Whipple Building, which today houses the ICE courtrooms and the offices of the ICE for a 5-state area. Next, I'd like to take a few minutes to tell stories about the beginnings of St. Paul's Church here. When Ezekiel here and James Lloyd Wright and Henry Benjamin Whipple and Emma Gobble and their associate men and women first traveled across Minnesota, there weren't any roads, no railroads, bridges, or inns. They walked the trails through deep forests and tall grass prairies. They climbed into canoes and paddled across rivers and lakes. They found housing in wigwams, cabins, shelters, with whoever would offer them any hospitality. Whipple was caught in a blizzard, riding in his carriage drawn by his horse Bayshot, and both horse and bishop survived together, buried in a haystack beside the trail. Cornelia did not often accompany the bishop during the missions. She wrote him a letter. It was the bed bugs and mosquitoes. On Lake Superior, there was a thriving town on the Wisconsin side called Superior, with commercial access to the east. Religious services of various denominations were provided from Superior, as well as provisions for a few families living on the hillside where Duluth now stands. The first known service of Bishop Whipple in Duluth was in the afternoon of August 5, 1866, after a morning service across the Bay of Superior. The bishop stayed in the area several weeks, continuing services in the home of the Luke Marvin family and baptizing children who were brought to the services from around the area. What made the difference for the little village of Duluth was the arrival of General George B. Sargent and his family. General Sargent was the financial representative of J. Cook, who was chartered by Congress to build a transcontinental railroad with its eastern terminus at Duluth. General Sargent and J. Cook were both Episcopalians. And by the fall of 1869, there was an Episcopal church building, a church bell, an organ, a rector by the name of the Reverend Mason Gallagher from Paterson, New Jersey, and a congregation. Mr. Gallagher has carried the reputation of bringing with him the extremely low churchmanship from the Eastern establishment and did not seek union with the Diocese of Minnesota. Episcopalians in Duluth went to J. Cook's church, while Mr. Gallagher was the minister. After he left in 1870, Bishop Whipple brought Joseph Gilfillan to Duluth, ordained him deacon, and organized St. Paul's Church in Duluth. In that Mississippi River town, it brought to my mind the story of the organization of St. Paul's Church down in Winona. In that Mississippi River town, Episcopalian ladies had been meeting for services and Sunday school in a public room up over the local tavern. When Bishop Whipple's visit was anticipated, the ladies needed to organize a vestry and wardens in order to incorporate a parish. Now, women were not qualified to be wardens in the vestry. So they went downstairs, signed up the men in the tavern, presented all men vestry and wardens to the bishop, who then founded St. Paul's Winona. Here in Duluth, Joseph Gilfillan's ministry at St. Paul's was so successful that he was resented by other denominations for aggressive proselytizing. Average Sunday attendance was greater at St. Paul's than any other church except the Roman Catholic parish. However, Bishop Whipple had his eye on Joseph Gilfillan. He became the well-known archdeacon for the reservation congregations in northern Minnesota. It was this remarkable young man, Joseph Gilfillan, who was ordained deacon by Bishop Whipple in 1870, who organized the vestry and wardens, who gave J. Cook's church the name St. Paul's, and who identified the congregation with the Diocese of Minnesota. His energetic ministry continued after his ordination as priest until 1872, when Bishop Whipple assigned him to the Ojibwe reservations, where he served for 25 years, becoming the first archdeacon for the Ojibwe communities. He learned to speak Ojibwe, made the first translation of the service book and hymnal into Ojibwe, would eventually establish Episcopalian communities throughout the Ojibwe reservation network, linking them with indigenous as well as white clergy, schools, and the annual Indian convocation. Among the many missions and missionary stands, the Reverend Edward Cobb said, who made a new translation of the prayer book and hymnal. By 1925, the Diocese of Duluth had the second highest native mission in the American Episcopal Church, second only to South Dakota. Back in Duluth, St. Paul's relied on the lay leadership of its men and women. Lay readers conducted Sunday services, and the rectors came and went as the economy fell into one panic and depression after another. From 1872 to 1893, the 6 rectors remained only 1 to 4 years each, with long vacancies in between. During this time of lay leadership, St. Paul's Church women took the initiative to organize and fund a hospital in 1881, which would become St. Luke's Hospital, still a distinguished healthcare facility today. From renting a boarded-up blacksmith shop to purchasing larger quarters at 2nd Avenue East and 4th Street in 1884 to present-day non-affiliated St. Luke's Hospital at that location. St. Paul's lay women erected the first hospital in Duluth and the second school of nursing in the state of Minnesota. Both men and women from St. Paul's served in various capacities in leadership within the hospital and nursing school until 1925. In the 1870s, St. Paul's had initiated another significant area of ministry. There had been a flood of immigrants into Duluth as the emerging harbor and railroads promised jobs and opportunity. St. Paul's provided an adult education school for immigrants, a free school at night during the winter months. Now, I'm going to speculate that many of these immigrants would be undocumented, coming perhaps as families, by ship, by rail, or across the Canadian border. Many of them would be illegal immigrants today, subject to arrest and trial at the Bishop Whipple Federal Building in St. Paul, separated from family, jailed, and deported. St. Paul's free adult night school would make this parish a flagship in the sanctuary city movement today. Years later, in 1981, another immigrant ministry was underway in the house next door, among the Hmong community. And so these are just a bit of the story of St. Paul's first years in Duluth, and what it has meant for its mission in this city up to this very day. Now I have to tell the story of the Diocese of Duluth, St. Paul's and Trinity Cathedral. In telling the story, I'm aware that I am wandering into the quagmire on every Episcopal Church issue, positive and negative, that was in our church at the turn of the 19th and the 20th century. From the beginning, St. Paul's remained aloof from the Diocese of Minnesota, delaying its identity with the diocese, using Episcopalian services, but referring to itself as J. Cook's Church, feeling the distance from Bishop Whipple's cathedral city of Farragut, and experiencing the roller coaster economy of an international seaport dependent on the mines and the forests of northern Minnesota. In addition, Episcopalians brought to Duluth and throughout the urban West an upper-class awareness in the culture of ethnic and indigenous poverty. To add to the mix, as a religious institution in American Protestantism, the Episcopal Church was torn apart by the High Church versus Low Church's internal conflict. On the other side of St. Louis Bay, over in Wisconsin, High Churchmanship was dominant and was brought to Minnesota by James Lloyd Breck and those associate mission stations among the Ojibwe planted dominant brought to Minnesota by James Lloyd Breck was associate mission among the Ojibwe planted Anglo-Catholicism in Minnesota's early mission strategy. On the other hand, St. Paul's early years identified the parish firmly in the Low Church culture of Mr. Gallagher. For example, in 1954, when Mr. McGinnis came to Calvary Church in Rochester from St. Paul's Duluth, he had the Calvary altar guild ladies remove all the brocade vestments for Holy Communion from the sacristy. The altar guild ladies sent them to me, a new priest serving in Laverne, Minnesota, that had no vestments at all. Years later, when I was editing the Calvary Church History publication, I took the section on Wendell McGinnis's ministry to his widow, Charlotte, in order to critique the publication. When I was finishing our work together, she looked up with tears in her eyes, and she said, if Wendell could see the incense pot coming down the aisle at Calvary Church, he would rise up from his grave in utter dismay. In those days, the Calvary vestry requested Bishop Kellogg to send the lowest churchman he could find. St. Paul's provided Canada. Back in the days at the end of the 19th century, Bishop Whipple was also dealing with churchmanship issues in the national church. His diocese was exploding with population growth and transportation accessibility through roads, trails, and lakes and rivers. Some of his lay leadership held personal and corporate wealth beyond imagination. Geographically, the emerging urban dominance of Minneapolis and St. Paul outstripped the agricultural south and the mining and lumbering north. Mr. Whipple had planted nearly 300 congregations on the railroads across Minnesota. This sprawling Episcopalian community was far beyond the administration of only one bishop. To address the lack of unity, convocations were tried for a while. Then archdeacons served in specialized ministries. In 1886, Whipple called for an assistant bishop. The Reverend Malon Gilbert was elected and served the diocese as a deeply loved bishop until his death in 1900. The issues of Minnesota's episcopacy have been overwhelming from the very beginning, and they continue through our current episcopal transition. Our honored guest tonight, Brian Pryor, will surely attest to that. In 1892, Bishop Whipple proposed the division of diocese into two dioceses. The upper two-thirds as the Diocese of Duluth, with its administrative center in Duluth, and the lower one-third as the Diocese of Minnesota, with its center at the Cathedral in Farrell. Whipple's proposal was voiced at the annual diocesan convention, which was held here at St. Paul's, Duluth. The National Church's General Convention was held in Minneapolis in 1895. The General Convention's division of Minnesota into a diocese of Farrell and a missionary district out of Duluth was adopted, but without any financial support. The missionary district was given to the exhausted Bishop Gilbert. The first annual convention of the Diocese of Duluth was held later in 1895, but not here in the city of Duluth, but at Brainerd. 6 months after that, the first bishop of for the missionary district was appointed by the House of Bishops, not elected by the new missionary district. He was the Reverend James Morrison, consecrated in Albany, New York. He was a scholar in Greek and Hebrew. He was a high churchman and assigned by the House of Bishops to serve North Dakota as well as Duluth. He left North Dakota in 1899, and Duluth became a diocese instead of a missionary district in 1907. He administered Duluth for 25 years. The initial endowment, however, for the Duluth missionary district came from John D. Rockefeller, who was a Baptist, for the support of the Iron Range clergy, and also for his own journey. During these years, from 1893 to 1922, the Reverend Albert W. Ryan served as rector of St. Paul's, Duluth. Dr. Ryan was articulate about the Diocese of Minnesota under Bishop Whipple having slighted St. Paul's in diocesan matters. While Whipple divided Minnesota into convocations for administrative purposes, St. Paul's was not asked to provide the leadership. Responding to the distance with Whipple, Dr. Ryan assumed the leadership for the separatist movement. He succeeded with the division of Minnesota into the Diocese of Minnesota from Faribault and the Diocese of Duluth from Duluth. The first convention of the Diocese of Duluth, however, was held at Brainerd. Dr. Ryan had every reason to believe that he would be named bishop of the new missionary district, and that St. Paul's would remain the cathedral. Even with that political and strategic disappointment in the background, Dr. Ryan would continue to serve St. Paul's for 29 years, moving the building from its original location to just, I think, 2 blocks from the new Bishop's Cathedral. The cornerstone at the new St. Paul's was laid in 1912, and the first services held in 1915. It was, and is, a simply magnificent parish building reflecting the dignity and the affluence of its membership. In the meantime, Bishop Morrison was building a new diocesan center with a bishop for a splendid Trinity Cathedral. Beginning his diocesan mission in 1897, the new bishop's chapter house was ready in 1907 with Trinity Cathedral to be built beside it. In that year, the city had 6 Episcopal congregations and the pro-cathedral located in the chapter house. Beneath the names and the dates and the demographics lie the high church versus the low church politics, the financial concerns of the fledgling diocese, and the career aspirations of those clergy looking toward Minnesota's Twin Cities urban center. While Trinity Cathedral struggled with its declining membership, it still rejected its vestry's proposal to merge with St. Paul's in 1935. Trinity Cathedral dissolved when Duluth reunited with Minnesota in 1944, with many of its members transferring to St. Edward's, Indiana. In the meantime, St. Paul's was assisting the congregations up the North Shore, 2 harbors, and Silver Bay with both spiritual and material resources. Bishop Morrison's 25-year ministry was followed by Bishop Granville and his 12-year ministry, and Bishop Benjamin Kemmerer's 11-year ministry in Duluth and 4-year ministry in the reunited diocese under Bishop Stephen Healy. Bishop Bennett came to the Diocese of Duluth and St. Paul's in Minneapolis and struggled with shrinking financial support of the National Church for Indian work, the declining northern Minnesota population, and the economic depression facing the iron and lumber industry. St. Paul's Duluth was contributing 1/3 of the diocesan budget. At Bishop Bennett's resignation in 1933, the Right Reverend Benjamin Kemmerer, coadjutor bishop, Duluth became the diocesan bishop. He was elected coadjutor bishop after he had served as rector here of St. Paul's Duluth for only 2 years. His election and consecration after he was in office, he moved the bishop's office to St. Cloud, where it remained after he became diocesan bishop of Duluth and the suffragan bishop of the reunited diocese of Minnesota. In many ways, the parish of St. Paul's Duluth, while not fulfilling Dr. Ryan's vision of St. Paul's as the cathedral and his own consecration as Duluth's diocesan bishop, St. Paul's has been and is the anchor for the mission of the Episcopal Church in northern Minnesota. 2 of its distinguished sons of St. Paul's are clergy with us here this weekend, Tom Harris. Now I want to turn the page to another chapter in the mission of the Episcopal Church in Minnesota. This story begins also with the call of Dr. James White back to the Ojibwe near Raymond. With the spirit of abnegago and the consent of Chief Holdenday, St. Columba's Mission and Church School were the first buildings of the Episcopal Church to serve the indigenous people west of the Mississippi. The year 1852 is the date in Minnesota's Episcopal history when the vision for a vast jurisdiction as an Indian diocese with its own bishop would begin, a vision which would be adapted in the Niobrara jurisdiction, serving the Lakota people years later. In Minnesota, at Gulliver, Breck and Abnegago's St. Columba's Mission flourished. Preaching stations sprang up along the canoe routes, with Ojibwe settlements transformed into little communities of log cabins, neat vegetable gardens, similar to their white neighbors. Men were farming with whole eggs. Women were housekeeping and sewing and scrubbing. Children were reading books and singing the Episcopal liturgy. Then it happened. The white missionaries had to flee after experiencing native assaults. They left Nagabo in charge of the Gulf mission. It had been a 5-year heartfelt endeavor which dramatically changed the Episcopal Church in Minnesota. To continue the mission among the Ojibwe, Bishop Kemper ordained Nagabo deacon in 1859, and after a visit to St. Columbus, Whipple would write in his autobiography, "Our Indian affairs are at their worst. Without government, without protection, without personal rights and property, subject to every evil influence, and the prey of covetous, dishonest white men, while the fire water flowed in rivers of death." Following the 1862 war, the entire surviving Dakota Nation would be deported to Crow Creek on the Missouri River, with the legislative genocide implemented at the local, state, and federal level. The Ojibwe escaped deportation partly because Nagabo had walked through the night down Gull River to warn the military of Fort Ripley of an Ojibwe attack similar to the attack that Lakota attacked at the Lower Sioux Agency. Bishop Whipple wrote, "Nagabo walked all night down the Gull River, dragging in the canoe his wife and children, that he might give warning to the fort. 2 of his children died of exposure." Then Nagabo sent messages to the Mille Band to send warriors to protect the fort, 100 came in months. When he returned to St. Columbus, he found the mission buildings had been burned to the ground, the entire mission community was vandalized, and the little gardens of the Episcopal